The stories we tell and how we tell them are key to building a brand that resonates. Well, we're going to talk about how you can authentically share your story in a way that connects with your audience in this episode of Content Creators Unite, the show where we discuss all things content creation. So if you want to learn how to grow your business using blogs, newsletters, books, and more, hey, you're in the right place. I'm your host, John Clements. Our guest for today's episode is Rhonda Parker Taylor. Rhonda is a writer, entrepreneur, and academic researcher. Her recent suspense novel, Crossroads, became a bestseller thanks to a thoughtful blend of storytelling and targeted content strategies. Rhonda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And you're talking about one of my favorite things, how to clarify and be truthful to bring an authentic image of yourself. You first have to know you first. So thank you for having me. Can't wait to get engaged in this conversation. And everybody out there, pull up a chair, put your earphones on, whatever you have to do so you can get some clarity and some ideas even for your own marketing.
Yeah, and I love that. And to your point, like if there's a way to be authentic and truthful and still market yourself, you don't have to do it like a used car salesman. So I'm excited to talk about that too. So Rhonda, I shared just a very brief bit about you, but can you share a little bit more about your background and how you got it to doing what it is you do?
Sure, I'd love to. Well, first of all, I'm from Indiana, the Midwest. So I have definitely had to embrace who I am, where I come from, which is a small town in Noblesville. My education background is I have a bachelor's in management and science, an MBA, and then I have a doctorate in management also. So, my background's all in business, but a lot of people say, well, how did you end up doing what you did, with a fiction novel? And then how did you end up doing this? And it's like, it all kind of creates a story of success. And that's what I tell every one of my clients. What is the story of success that you want others to understand about you? Well, first, business came for me naturally because my family was entrepreneurs. So I learned from an early age, working in my dad's steel manufacturing plant when he first started it out in a barn all the way today, that everything is about a process. And in manufacturing, if one step extra costs money. And so taking that entrepreneur background, I went into school to learn about business, thinking, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But I kind of got sidetracked and took the education and started teaching at a college level and working at, as an administrator at the college level until one day life said, hold on, slow down, time for you to be authentic to you. And it took a life hitting lesson for that to happen. It was one of those decisions I didn't take lightly because I enjoyed building people. But all of that pulled together to help me have my story of success. Building others also means you should be building yourself. And that's where that entrepreneurial background and learning and taking all the education and pulling it together, not only for my clients, but also for myself, became really important. And to do that, I had to be authentic to myself and practice what I had been preaching as far as emotional intelligence.
Whew, so that sounds like quite the journey. It sounds like it probably took a very long time for you to get to your success story. So what is it that excites you the most about what you're doing now? Like if you could just tell someone, this is what you need to know about what I'm doing. This is how awesome it is. Here, let me tell you, what would you tell that person?
What excites me the most is the happiness and the joy I feel because I'm creating a model that's successful, not only for myself, but I can do for my clients. It's important to navigate the information with integrity and value. And once you've done that journey to self, you're able to create something that's special and that excites you. But when you're creating a life based on, I'm going to say it's lies, but it's not necessarily lies. It's necessity. It's,
Mhm.
the process that was there before you. It's all these things that kind of get you to deter your path. then you don't feel that joy and happiness that it gets you up in the morning and says, I've got to work 8 hours today. Instead of I've got to, boy, isn't it wonderful to have, be able to do this for 8 hours a day. And so leading with emotional intelligence and leading with the understanding and self-awareness that, hey, it's a privilege to do something I enjoy, not a dread to do something I enjoy.
I love that. Yeah, that's been my own experience as well. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of years doing the job out of necessity, and then
Mhm.
to be able to transition. And now, like you said, I can do the things I enjoy doing. And sometimes I just have to sit back and go, I actually get to do this for a living. This is amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, joy is such an important thing. So part of your joy, part of your success story is this novel called Crossroads that I think you released in 2023.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it's a best-selling suspense novel. So first of all, congratulations, because that's no small feat. And I'm excited to read this book actually a little bit later.
Thank
Uh,
you.
but because we want to talk about, content marketing on this show, I really would love to start breaking down like all these lessons you learned. Like, how did you actually incorporate it as you went about marketing your book? Like, what did that process look like for you?
Okay, I'd like to step back just 2 seconds and say, if there's someone out there that has this kind of project, it took me a long time to make myself vulnerable and go out there and actually sell it. I had written it, and then I had found a traditional publisher, and the traditional publisher, after 2 years, pulled out. So I had put this project that I had put together into somebody else's hands that I had no control over, then they killed it. And so then I was like in that vulnerable state, and I'm still doing my consulting, still thriving in other areas, but I hadn't stepped out on that platform again for a second. And there's many people that have that experience. There's three ways that you can approach this business. One is traditional publishing. Now they won't touch you typically unless you're an NFL player type of a writer that has 100,000 followers, have gone through 10,000 hoops, and it's just virtually impossible to get a traditional publisher to touch you with your first book. The second is a hybrid. A hybrid person is someone that has the traditional clout, but they're still allowing you to have full creative ability of the book, and there is no pulling out of the contract at the end. You don't have that risk involved in it, and they help you brand. That's the route that I took the second time around. And then there's self-publishing. Nothing wrong with self-publishing, but that means you're going to learn the barcode, you're going to do the marketing, you are the CEO, fully responsible for everything. And if you're not in that industry already, it's virtually going to be impossible to get the results that you want unless you do already have that 100,000 followers, because it's kind of like a drip, drip, drip to sales, because it's every friend that you've known that's buying it. You don't have the expansive distribution that you would have in the first two examples. So once you pick your type, then you have to decide, what are you all about? Just like any business, and authors hate to hear that it's a business model, but it is a business model, and the content marketing is the most important part, other than writing the book, that is it for this market. So the very first thing I did is I partnered with Mindster Media. Mindster Media is a hybrid approach, and they also help you with your branding. They're not a sales organization, so they're not going to sell the book. They're going to brand you and help you create a model that you can grow your business. There are other ones out there that can do exactly the same thing. You could hire, a publicist, you can do these things. The branding is very important, because if you think of any major organization that has a book attached to it, let's go Grisham. You know exactly, as soon as you say Grisham, what you're going to get. If you say King, you know exactly what you're going to get. If you say, Agatha Christie, you know exactly what you're going to get. If you say, resiliency, who's the model for resiliency? So you go back and you have to say, what am I going to be known for? For me, I started out with a fiction novel, and they're going to say, well, what does that have to do with training and development? Well, in my fiction novel, it's a crime novel based out of Indianapolis. I'm from Indianapolis. There's my first target market. Okay. All the sites are real. This is my 30-second speech that I would do as I meet people at a function or a book signing that maybe have never heard of me. All the sites are real. The sites that you'll see are this circle, city county building, the mayor's office, Holiday Park, and the dead bodies found up behind Lafayette Square Mall on the railroad tracks on 38th and Guyan. Boom. I've expanded who might be interested that's been in Indiana or lives in Indiana. And then also people that have, that have no idea what I would like to know more about why the circle was made, blah, 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 blah. You've created a market there again. Now, it's a crime novel. It's similar to an Agatha Christie Clue type book. It's not like a king that goes into fantasy. So you see how I'm doing this story of how people might look at the book. And then they'll say, well, what does that have to do with your background in training and development? Well, then I go, well, because every single one of the characters are out of life balance. So you have one that's a workaholic. You have one that's dedicated to law and order and eating out of cardboard boxes and wondering why he's not having life fulfillment. You have one that's dedicated to his friends and ended up, a co-defendant for a murder because he's not loyal to himself. Then I go through, you can go through this, and then guess what? Boom. Book 2. A Journey to Life Balance by Rhonda Parker Taylor. It's a workbook approach to what I do my consulting to, which is helping people create that story of self-success. So my brand is not only using entertainment to help people reflect on their lives and their decisions, but it's also to then carry it on to case studies where you can go back then and say, okay, I'm out of balance. I related to Paris all the way. I'm a workaholic. I'm not having joy in my life, or I'm way into into law and order, and this is hurting my relationships, or whatever the character is that you can work through the 13 dimensions of your life and create peace, joy, and happiness.
So I gotta say, that's fascinating. I don't know that I've ever heard of that methodology of marketing before. So creative. Is that something that you came up with, or is that something that your agency helped you to find, or how did that happen?
I think it kind of evolved. First, it was book, and it was, I want to be a best-selling author. This is something I really want for myself. How do I get it there? They looked at the book. They said it's decent. It's a decent book. We can go ahead and start editing it. Then they came back and said, hey, we've got someone we think you need to talk to. And, we think you need a high-powered endorser to get the buzz going. And I'm like, well, who would that be? And the very first thing I'm thinking, because it's a suspense novel, was Tori Spelling. And they're like, no, that's not the person. I'm like, well, who would you recommend? They said Meryl Hemingway. Now, for my generation, Meryl Hemingway is a big deal. Maybe the younger people may not understand who we're talking about. We're talking about the granddaughter of the great Ernest Hemingway. We're talking about Academy Award winner that worked with Woody Allen and some of the greats in Hollywood. And then if you know anything about her story, is why they recommended her. And that is, she had to make a decision at one point. And when she released the YouTube video that told the whole story, that she actually related to the character, and the very last line is, there's a time in everybody's life where they have to make a decision because they've reached a crossroads. And that decision is success or failure, life or death. And she says that even chocolate has an expiration date. And I knew that she understood. So they helped me partner with somebody that was already in the same space I was, which was mental health, balancing. And so then it kind of evolved from there. So I get the YouTube video, I get her endorsement for my book. I play it the first 1,000 times. I'm the first 1,000 views, everybody. I am the content director person there going, because I couldn't believe, chills up and down my spine. But then, I had to look even further, and actually it was my husband that brought me back to reality. He says, "Are you here for a pat on the back? Are you here to distribute books and continue your brand, your thoughts, your methodology?" And I'm like, and at first it's like I didn't want to believe that that was true, but it's true. Marketing is a process that every step has to continue. I can't be the first 10,000 views. I have to move on. And what that did is this, okay, what's next? And then I'd already knew that I had this workbook done because I had been doing it with my college students for years, but it was not in a professional, book format. It was more in a college, you pass it out to your students in chunks and have them
Mhm.
do the exercises and do it. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute, we need to. And they suggested adding the case studies from the book. So they carry out, someone can say, oh, I identified with Paris, but just as examples of people that are out of balance with their true purpose.
So that's yeah, that's probably the most creative marketing strategy I've ever heard. So, to be honest, but I love it because it opens up the possibilities. Because I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I could maybe do this or that, and I never thought of that before. And I'm sure our listeners are going, oh, I didn't realize I could literally write a book if I wanted, and I could make that part of who I am and who my business is. Wouldn't have never thought about that if Rodna hadn't have brought that up. Um, but I've also noticed a lot of what you're saying really comes back to emotional intelligence. I feel like that's a theme that's been just kind of in the undercurrent the whole conversation. I know you've done a lot of research in that area. So I would love to hear just a little bit of insight about how increasing your EQ does tie into having better marketing.
Oh, I would love to talk about it. It's something I could talk about for hours. I hate to I tell you that. So we might be here longer than 30 minutes. I started researching emotional intelligence when I was in college. And one of the reasons is when I was younger, I was not considered the brightest one in the bulb in the group. I wasn't the brightest bulb, the crown that stuck out, all of these different terminologies. I was just the average person, average IQ, and people would even have said, they may have been concerned about my success. So then when I ran Daniel Goleman's seminal book on emotional intelligence, I was excited because it basically told me you don't have to have the highest IQ because IQ never changes. You're born with it. You just have to work on 21 characteristics that establishes your EQ. So IQ and EQ are like equivalent, is the way they score you, but one is right brain, one's left brain. You get your logic and your reasoning, which is your IQ, which is your science, math, reading, and then you have your EQ. And even though there's 21 characteristics, there's four different um, buckets for those dimensions. Intrapersonal skills is the first one. So that's your self-awareness. So if you're self-aware internally and externally, and this goes for your marketing too, especially, you need to know your biases. You need to know what directs your decision making. You need to know everybody's opinion in the room and how they feel about whatever that marketing campaign is. Because if you don't, you're missing out. You're really missing out on not only self and your self regard because you haven't defined everything, but also on markets that could be closed down to you because you're projecting your own biases. So it's the ability to be self aware about the emotions that are brought up by whatever the decision is that you make. So when you walk into a room, it's scanning for those emotions of others and bringing that out. Then there's the intrapersonal, intra, and then inter. That's your social ability. That's your ability to take social responsibility for the decisions you make, the emotions you do, the ability to thrive. And do you have empathy? That is the number one characteristic. I'm not talking about being a bleeding heart, because a lot of times you say empathy and oh, that won't bring bottom line, you know. No, empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Will that brand outlast you? Should be the question. If you're not putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and you're not doing the self reflection to find out about your biases and everything else, you are probably going to create a message that's based on your opinions, your ego, your transactions, and you've not thought about what somebody else could or is thinking about. It could have biases against women. It could have biases against a certain department that, like budgeting, or accounting. It could have all of these implications that you haven't even thought about. The third one is stress management. You have to be able to fare the waters. Marketing is stressful, so you better be able to have a stress tolerance, be able to push it out there, and then not only have impulse control. When you get a bad review, a troll, how are you going to respond? What is the risks of you responding? What is the best approach that's going to bring unity to your group, your organization, to you, to your message? So if you don't have these, like I had a CEO that had a high emotional intelligence, but the two characteristics that he had a terrible score on was stress tolerance and impulse control. So every happy event, he was gone. And every stressful event, he was hiding underneath his desk away from everybody so he wouldn't have to address it. So you have to be able to control those emotions and be part of that to be able to have a message that outlives you also. And then the last one is general mood. What mood do you have? Do you project happiness? Do you project darkness? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? What is that message that's out there? So the model of emotional intelligence not only is an individual model because you want to build these characteristics for yourself, but it's also a model for your organization and your teams. And if you can create it, you create a synergy based on the total EQ model of performance. And that means everybody is part of the model itself.
Oh, I love that. I think when we talk about content and marketing and running a business, it's so often like, what's the ROI, or like, look at your KPIs, or make sure you have processes. And those are all great things and you should do them. But to have a conversation like this, I think that probably ends up separating the wheat from the chaff, right? Like the people who really can succeed in these areas, I think can probably see success in those other areas too. And also have, like I said, the happiness and the joy and the peace, which I think is just as important as how much money is in the bank account, at least for me personally.
And the ROI is important. Your call to action is important. All of those things are important, but are you excluding some of those um, im, im, impressions, clicks, however you want to look at it, by what you're putting out? If you aren't drawing the not just the base of your product, but the whole content of the geographical region that you're doing, the everything that you've broken down as what you want to reach, then what you're doing is you're limiting your actual outcomes.
Yeah, and I just want to bring this up. I'm going to say this, and you can disagree with me if I'm wrong, but the one thing I want to caution our listeners is, um, don't think you have to have this all figured out before you start, because you're not going to.
No, you evolve. Like, yeah, I've done Crossroads, and when I wrote Crossroads, I wrote 4 other novels. that were fiction, that each character had their own. And now I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I have to do the self-help book on resiliency, on victimization, on, and so it's like it grows because now I have a process that has expanded. And that's what you want. Because if you don't have a product that is expanding in its influence and your brand isn't reaching more people and you're not, then you have something that's dying on the vine.
Yeah. So I think this segues into the next question. I'm assuming that this is going to form like a core part of your business, intelligent solutions.
Mhm.
I'm assuming these are the kind of things you help people with that. So could you just tell us a little bit about that business and then who would benefit from working with you?
So, Intelligent Solutions is an organization that I created coming out of the academic space, just so people know the history. What started it is I was working as the president of a college, and really my son was shot and killed at work, and he was college age, and some of his friends were in my classes, etc. So it was very painful for me to go back. So I took my value as an educator and I said, what can I do to add value to others? Because I really believe in helping people um, create that story of success. So I started with individuals. So individuals that are in a transition, maybe they're getting downsized from their organization. Maybe organizations are hiring people to help retrain because things are changing. That's where I would come in and I would help them train individuals not only on skills that they need, because you might need an IT person to train on the technical aspects of change in the environment, but in the mindset. Because when somebody has put their all into something and then something happens to them, in my case, someone came into my son's job and shot and killed him. I had to rechange my mindset. It was too hard to be around 20-year-olds. And so I said, okay, how can I help these people? How can I make them start and finish a project about redefining self, their organization, or their career? So that's where it started. That's the history of it. Then I was able to transition to how do I create brands? How do I create the message? How do I help them do the idea of creating something that outlives just the present leadership?
Nice. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your son. I can't imagine going through that, but I really am appreciative of the resilience you showed and the fact that you live what you preach and you were able to, move forward from that. That's a pretty amazing story.
And I think that that's what has helped me with my story of success. Honestly, you know, if we can take our pains and make them our purposes, if same thing in our brands, you make mistakes when you make decisions. Then what did you learn from that and how can you turn it around? And when you deconstruct things and then put one foot in front of the other, no matter what it is that you're going through as an organization, as a leader, as an individual, then when you do that and you become self-aware, that emotional intelligence model kicks in and you can outlive whatever that state was.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, if you're going to be a leader or make a decision, you're going to make mistakes. Like this is just going to happen. So like if I feel like if you can just accept that and like you said, learn from it, try to move forward afterwards and be better at whatever it might be, then I think you'll be in a good spot.
Yes, I think so too. And I think everybody out there needs to know you're born for success. That success doesn't necessarily mean financial. It means happiness. It means peace. And if you follow it, you brand it, and you do it the steps that we talk about and use your resources, you're redefining the success through your eyes, not everybody else's eyes.
100%, exactly. So I want to pivot just a little bit because as important as this discussion has been, and I think it's fairly unique to talk about some of these topics as they relate to content marketing. So I'm, super super valuable. But I also want to get to know you as a person a little bit better because that's to me just as important. So I assume at some point in your day you're not working because I assume you have good boundaries. So when you're not working, What do you like to do for fun?
Well, first of all, I try to schedule it in. So that's something I love
Nice.
people to talk about. One of the very first things I do in the morning is I open up my blinds so I can see the world. You know, to me, seeing things from all different perspectives is an important part of my life. I love wildlife. I love to see the squirrels chasing each other up the trees, at the deer running through the yard, whatever it might be. So that's part of that is a first part. It's just putting little chunks during the day even when I'm working that bring me joy and happiness and inspiration. The second thing is I love to walk. I love to be active. And family is a big center for me. I love to cook. So, like over the holidays, I said I played Mrs. Claus the whole weekend. But it's really, I was making ribs once 12 hours, then turned around and did a full ham, and then I turned around and did beans and ham, and everything took about 12 hours to do, but it was part of me nurturing not only self, but that was part of my love language, which is serving others.
Nice. So you've really given us quite a lot of value and wisdom already, and I thank you for that. Is there one piece of wisdom or like a life lesson you've learned in your journey? Could be life related, could be work related, that just you could leave with our audience and just help them be, just 1% better tomorrow than they were today.
Well, the first thing that I used to hate that my dad would, well, actually, there's two pieces that my dad used to say. And I used to want to strangle him, scream every time he would say it when I was younger. He's always say, "Don't compare yourself to others." And usually that meant I wasn't going to get my way. That's why I hated it. But I've learned that there's nothing wrong with comparing, like if you're doing an analysis of something. But when you compare yourself to others, what you do is you're diminishing self. Envy makes the bones rot. So what ends up happening is if you take on somebody else's persona, you want that persona to be you. You start desiring something that's not your own world. You no longer will enjoy your own world. So that's the same thing when we're creating marketing. We need to be authentic to what's real sometimes. We sometimes paint this world that's perfect, and life isn't always perfect. And the second thing is if it's meant to be, it's up to you. Your team can help you, they can create for you, they can do the processes that you ask them to do, but they're not going to build your story of success. If it's meant to be, it's up to you. That means you have to carry the baton. That doesn't mean that everybody else carries the baton to you to make you have that story of success.
Oh, if it's meant to be, it's up to you. I'm gonna write that down. That's going to my journal today. That's a very good point. So, Rhonda, I am sure that some of our listeners out there are really jiving with what you're saying. They're going, I love this. I've never thought about this before. I got to know more. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
They can go to my website. It's rhondaparkertaylor.com. Rhonda's with an H. I got the email there for it too. I've got all my social media on there. All my social media is rhondaparkertaylor.com. Feel free to follow, comment, ask questions there. I do try to it also with me for content marketing. What I try to do is I try to branch it into inspirational, obviously my products, and then also a little bit about me or what's going on, so that people that can have an authentic relationship that way.
Perfect. And I will be sure to link to your website. All the things you mentioned. I'll probably throw a link to your book on Amazon just so people can get that too.
Yeah.
So, Rhonda, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, and everybody out there have a great day.
Perfect. I agree. And if you enjoyed our discussion today, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I reach out and get the best people I can find, just like Rhonda. We have amazing conversations, tons of value, and you get to be the benefit of that. So, with that, have a great day, and we'll see you next time on the Content Creators Unite podcast.